Okay, lesson 1 for what I like to call the basics. This is going to be an ongoing theme whenever I think there needs to be a side note or a point of discussion, something like that. And since this is going to be the first video, it's coming from the standpoint of teaching someone new to the martial arts. This is a good place to start with the basics. So, we're going to discuss horse stance. Now, until somebody figures out how to make houses, buildings, what have you, in midair, you always have to start with a stable structure. And the first and really biggest stance in any traditional martial arts system is going to be the horse stance. In fact, arguably, and I'm sure someone's going to try to, this is the stance that every other stance is built off of. Whether it's fighting stance, cat stance, we'll get into all those later. This is the big one. This is the one that starts it all. Now, I'm not one for convention. I know in Ed Parker, Senior Grandmaster Parker's books, he likes to go over specific stances. I know in some schools they actually do this. I'm not really a huge fan of it, but there is something called an attention stance. It's where you essentially stand with your heels together, your feet at a 45-degree angle. We're going to use this as a point of instruction, if you will, for getting into a really good horse stance, because one of the things that any student needs to do is tailor their art to themselves, not to what anybody else thinks, not wide stances you're not going to be able to move out of. This is the best way to start in learning a horse stance. So you stand with your feet together, your heels together, feet at a 45-degree angle, and then from there, to measure out your horse stance, you turn your heels out so your toes are pointing together at each other, and then you move your feet out to a 45-degree angle again, to where your toes are pointing away from each other, and then simply straighten out your feet so they're both going parallel. That's it. That's all you have to do to measure out a horse stance and make it fit yourself, tailor it to yourself. Now, from there, it's all a matter of bending your knees. Now, I know from here, this angle of the film, you want to get your knees to where they're over your feet. I know that's a big point of conversation. It's a big point of argument that gives you bad knees and all the rest of it. You don't have to bend that low if you don't want to, but I can tell you this right now, it's going to make your stance much more stable the more you're able to bend. So if you're not able to bend that far, do what you can to get there, but all in all, as deep as you can get that stance, that's going to make that stance much more solid for you. The inverse of that situation is the deeper you are in the stance, the harder it is it's going to be to move out of it, but we'll kind of get into that later. The reason we're discussing the horse stance is because it is the basic stance that you're going to see in Sword and Hammer. And we're going to get that video up and running for you here in a bit. And you've now watched the first of the basics.